There is one scene which always haunted me after watching Elephant.
Hey, you guys.
The silence which precedes the jolting gunshot, followed by the screams, is shocking to watch, but also seemingly the killers are so casual. This scene has always stuck with me because it is different to most films. There is no soundtrack, no music in the background, nothing for the audience to hold on to for comfort, only the tragic reality of what a school shooting would be like. This is in juxtaposition to the first half of the film until the shooting begins. The film is similar to cinema verite, meaning cinema truth, a French film movement which focused on people in everyday situations with authentic dialogue and naturalness of action. It is characterized by the use of long takes. Let us explore the beautiful yet haunting use of sound used by director Gus Van Sant to set the eerie tone of the film, giving it a somber mood and foreshadowing the horror to come. This is Elephant. The film was made by Gus Van Sant in response to the 1999 Columbine High School massacre in Colorado, US, in which 2 students killed 12 students and 1 teacher, and wounding 21 people before taking their own lives. It was the deadliest school shooting at the time and shocked the nation. From interviews, we understand that Van Sant felt that there needed to be a dramatic interpretation of the event, and at the time, no one wanted to tread such treacherous waters. The first question that comes to my mind when I think about school shootings is, why do they do it? Yet, the film does not answer this and gives multiple clues and angles, leaving the question unanswered and for the audience to figure out. Elephant was made in 2003 and set in Watt High School and follows the daily lives of several students, whilst 2 of the students, Eric and Alex, prepare for something more horrific. Notably, Van Sant didn't write dialogue for the film, and instead he let the teenage actors improvise, which is why the dialogue feels natural. More on that later. Firstly, let's talk about music. Gus Van Sant uses music masterfully. There is no score or music throughout the entire film, apart from 2 classical pieces from Beethoven, Moonlight Sonata and Fur Elise. The first song we hear is Moonlight Sonata, and is written in 1801 when life was at a breaking point for Beethoven. His worsening deafness might never be cured, and he was deeply in love with his student, 17-year-old Countess Giulietta Giocardi, who due to social differences was refused marriage to Beethoven and married another man 2 years later. The song was dedicated to her, and one of his closest friends had recently died. In a letter 1 year following Moonlight, he contemplates taking his life, but decides to live and continue to fulfill his passion to make music. In the film, the music plays softly over the seemingly normal actions of the football players, yet it creates an ominous tension. It foreshadows and forebodes Eric and his spiral into committing murder-suicide. However, only the first movement of the song plays, which represents difficulty, whilst the other 2 movements, which represent the will to overcome and instead looking at life positively, are left out. The second song we hear is Fur Elise by Beethoven and is diegetic in nature. It is played by Eric ominously as Alex plays a violent video game, murdering people with guns. Towards the end, he transitions into Moonlight Sonata, now creating a motif between Eric and the song we heard earlier in the film. Sound effects are used realistically and are the focus of the soundscape. In one scene, Elias is taking photos of a couple, and as he walks, the leaves rustle loudly, placing us into the scene. One thing to note here is the feeling of synesthesia, which is when stimulation of one sensory organ leads to involuntary experiences in a second sensory or cognitive pathway. Put simply, we can look or hear something in a film and we may feel something in our body. For example, in this scene, when we hear the sound of the leaves, we imagine the time we have walked through leaves and what that feels like. This is important because it puts us in the place of the characters. This allows us to empathize with the characters. Moreover, because music is used sparingly, the sound effects are heightened. And when music does play, it makes the sound effects seem softer, even though the volume is the same. For example, even as I made this video, I learned this principle. As I lower the volume on my voice, the background noise seemingly gets louder. And as I increase volume on my voice, it gets softer, even though the volume of the background noise is the same. This applies to the film and allows us to feel more. After all, good movies make us feel something. That is Gus Van Sant's intention. He wants us to feel something, so we become invested in the story, in the characters, and also in finding a solution to this problem which still persists today.
Where'd you go?
I'm sorry.
There are many books about writing great dialogue, including Writing Dialogue by Tom Chiarella or Dialogue by Gloria Kempton, and even Stephen King's On Writing, a memoir of the craft, in which he states, "Writing good dialogue is art as well as craft," on page 120. And also, as with all other aspects of fiction, the key to writing good dialogue is honesty, on page 184. Unlike most dialogue in films, most of the dialogue is improvised, apart from the shooting scenes. Van Sant wanted the dialogue to be natural, so they cast teenagers and allowed them to improvise. The dialogue isn't very deep, nor does it have layers of subtext, and yet it still works. Why? Well, it is because that is how it is supposed to be. It is meant to make us feel like an ordinary high school, possibly similar to one we went to. This then contrasts with the wicked nature of the shootings, amplifying the abruptness and almost surprising us when it happens. Even though there are clues sprinkled throughout the film, such as Eric replying to a question.
Where are you riding?
Oh, this?
Yeah.
It's my plan.
For what?
Oh, you'll see.
This is how Van Sant uses dialogue to put us into the minds of the characters and create a sense of realism. We become simply another student in the school, a mere onlooker unable to do anything about what is happening. This must have been what the children experiencing the Columbine High School massacre would have felt, helpless and scared. Moreover, I briefly want to mention the frame in which the film is shot. The aspect ratio, which simply means how wide the film is compared to the height, is roughly 1.3 to 1, which is close to the original silent films from the 1930s. Most cinemas use an aspect ratio of 2.59 to 1, which is far wider than it is high. However, Anne Friedberg states in Virtual Window, how the world is framed may be as important as what is contained within that frame. Considering this, Elephant utilizes brilliant long takes, walking through school corridors. Although the frame remains the same, the architecture of the school creates a more claustrophobic frame, making us feel trapped like the students. In Sergei Eisenstein's writings, he talks about the dynamic square, saying on page 209 to embrace the multitude of expressive rectangles in the world. This is why I believe Van Sant chose a more narrow frame to shoot the film in. To conclude, Elephant does a fantastic job of helping us understand what a school shooting would be like, and also poses many questions which the viewer needs to engage with. Why does this happen? Why didn't anyone see the warning signs building up to the event? What did the parents do wrong? These are all questions which are also applied to the real world when we think about school shootings, and the film gives us no clear answer but forces us to think for ourselves. That is the beauty of the film. Through the soundscape, music, and dialogue, Van Sant places us directly into the average lives of the students, which will never again be average.